Hello, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are today. Thanks for joining our live stream, which is streaming actually to a number of different platforms. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and actually TikTok today too. So thanks for being here. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're here to talk about today. This is the first time I've ever done this sort of a live stream, but the whole point of today's live stream is to talk about careers in consulting. Yeah, how to get started, how to advance your career, how to make a pivot. Maybe you're just coming out of college looking for a way to break into consulting, or maybe you're already in consulting looking to make a change. Maybe you're in industry and you're looking for the opportunity or some tips on how to transition into consulting. So that's really the purpose of today, is to chat through some of those topics here today. And I'm going to take audience questions here today. I've got a list of questions from past sessions I've done on this topic that I'll start with, but I'd love to hear comments here from the live audience. So depending on where you are today, if you could just go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining from today. I'd love to hear or see where you're from. And also, if you don't mind, beyond that, in addition to the location you're in, maybe also just let us know or let me know what is your career position or situation. Are you coming out of college? Are you just interested in consulting? Are you already in consulting, looking to advance your career, looking to make a change, or whatever the situation is? So just drop it in the chat if you don't mind, and let me know where you're at, both geographically as well as where you're at in your career as well. And by the way, as we're talking here today too, by the way, I'm going to leave you can see at the bottom of the screen, you should see at the bottom of the screen, an email address called work@thirdstage-consulting.com. We're actively hiring and growing our team. So if you are interested in a potential career at Third Stage, feel free to submit your resume to the email address that will be up on the screen here throughout the session. So glad to have you all here today. If you see me looking away and looking around, it's because I have two cameras on different platforms, and I'm trying to read questions too. So bear with me as I'm multitasking here, doing this discussion here. So I guess just to start, I'll tell you a little bit real quickly about Third Stage for those of you that don't know, but I'll also just jump into questions right after that. But just to give you a little bit of background, Third Stage Consulting is an independent and technology agnostic consulting firm. So we help clients select and implement different types of technologies to improve their businesses. That includes ERP systems, CRM, HCM, all sorts of different technologies. So that's essentially what we do. We tend to focus on program management. The organizational change side of change is something that's very important to us and something we're good at. We also do process improvement, architecture, and data migration. I'm sure I'm forgetting something in there, but we do basically all kinds of stuff related to digital transformations. So that's a bit about us. And so we work with all the different platforms in the space. We work with SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Workday, NetSuite, et cetera. That's the beauty of being independent, is that we get to learn a lot about the different technologies that are out there in the market. So I guess just to start, I'm gonna jump in then and just get right to some questions. And again, if you don't mind dropping in the chat any questions you have along the way, that makes this a lot more engaging and fun. So I'll keep an eye on all the platforms here. Before I get to the questions, though, thanks for everyone joining here. If you have someone from Arkansas, we have Edwin from Vancouver, British Columbia. Let's see what we have here. Miss Missouri, I'm not sure where that is, but thank you for being here, Paul. East Texas, great part of the country. Raleigh, North Carolina, Canada. I won't show them all here, but Fayetteville, Arkansas. So a lot of good turnout here from a lot of different places here. So I'll keep an eye on the chat here as we're talking, and I'm a terrible multitasker. I have to warn you first, so you may sense that I get a little frazzled as I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. So bear with me there. I also want to say hello to David from Zambia. He may win so far as being the person that's joining from the furthest from where I am. I'm in Denver, Colorado, by the way. Indianapolis, Indiana, lots of different locations here. Brazil, Sydney, Australia. So thanks for being here, everyone, today. So I guess just to start, one of the questions I get often whenever I speak to college classes, which is something I enjoy doing, I'll speak to IT courses or supply chain courses at colleges throughout the world, And one of the things I'll do when I'm talking to classes is just take questions about career stuff. A lot of times the questions are centered around how do I get started in consulting, what are the skills I need, that sort of thing. So I think at first it helps to understand what consulting is and what the different dimensions of consulting are. And that'll sort of determine what the best path forward is for you. And perhaps you have questions based on those different paths that we'll talk about here today. So when I look at consulting, I think of it in a few different areas. You have different functions or different disciplines that you can focus on within consulting. So one, for example, is the technical consulting. If you're majoring in computer science or data science, or if you have a real technical background, it could be that you want to go down the path of the hands-on technical configuration, development, customization of technology. So that's one path, is the technology piece. You also have the program management piece. It could be that you're managing projects, you're managing different work streams, you're certified or you're getting certified in program management. That's another angle you could take, is going down the path of program management. You could also do process analysis, or sort of the business analysis piece, which is where a lot of people coming out of college will start, is they'll learn the business and the operations by focusing on understanding clients' business processes and how those processes can be improved with technology and general process changes. So that business analysis is a great place to start, especially earlier in your career. And it could be that you start off as a business analyst and then you move up to, say, project management, for example. So it's not that you have to pick and stay in the same area, but usually you want to hone in and start with one of these key areas that I'm talking about here. And then another field or another discipline within digital transformation, which is really important, and in my opinion, the most important, is organizational change management, and really understanding the impacts that technology will have on an organization, understanding how they might be restructuring as part of a digital transformation. Because especially in today's day and age, whenever you're going through a transformation or an organization's going through a transformation, more often than not, they're not just putting in technology. Usually they're putting in technology because they're trying to change something fundamental to their business. And that typically results in significant process changes, which is what I just talked about, is that business analysts might focus on. And it also typically results in organizational changes. So it could be restructuring. A lot of times companies are consolidating functions. So instead of having disparate parts of the business throughout the world, they might consolidate into single functions. So that's another piece of it, is this whole change management component. And then I'd kind of throw in there, I guess, maybe it's not really secondary, but an area that a lot of people are focusing in more and more on, especially in the last couple of years with where the world is post-pandemic, and that is supply chain management. So a lot of times people getting into consulting will focus on supply chain management and really go deep into that discipline and understanding what those processes and operational improvements could potentially be. So one question I get, that's a bit of an overview of some of the different disciplines you could focus on. That's not all of them. There's other things you could focus on, like solution architecture, which would be more of an integration sort of role, like the strategic definition of what types of systems would work best for a client, and then ultimately figuring out how to integrate those systems. That's another discipline. There's also data science, more the analytics side of things. That's becoming extremely important in digital transformation, which sort of falls underneath the technical umbrella. But those are just some of the examples of different functional areas that you could get involved with. And I started my career primarily as a change management consultant, doing SAP projects, which, if you don't know what SAP is, that's a big ERP provider that is common with big Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies. And so I did change management for SAP projects, but I was certified, as part of my training, I was certified in SAP. So I knew how to configure the software and I knew the technology really well, but I preferred to focus on the change management side from basically day one of my career. And I still, to this day, focus very heavily on change management. So that's just a bit about how I started. I actually came out of college and went pretty much straight into my MBA, getting my master's degree. While I was getting my master's degree, the summer between the first and second year, I got an internship at a company here locally in Denver, Colorado, where I'm based. And they were looking for an intern to help redesign their business processes as part of an Oracle ERP implementation. So I sort of stumbled into it. I wasn't planning to do ERP stuff in my career, But through that experience, I found that I kind of enjoyed the whole ERP side of things, especially because it was so focused on business processes and organizational change. So I did that internship for about a year, from the summer before my second year of MBA all the way through the second year. And during my second year, I got recruited by PwC, which is or Price Waterhouse, which is a big consulting firm that's still around to this day. They hired me on, and that's really where I started postgraduate was at Price Waterhouse. So that was my journey. I tended to fight the whole technical focus. I tended to fight it and try to become more strategic and focus on the change management. In hindsight, I probably should have embraced the technology piece a little bit more. In fact, if I was going to college today, I absolutely would, because if you can marry the technical understanding with the strong business and organizational understanding, that's a really strong combination. I think I've developed that over the years, but if I would have focused on it earlier, I could probably be even better at being a consultant than I think I am. So that would be just some background of where I started and some advice I might provide or offer to people that are looking to get into consulting. I'll stop there talking about myself, but I just want to give a little bit of backdrop of how I got into consulting, and we can talk about other aspects of my career journey if you'd like. But let me actually, before I jump into my questions, I think we're already getting questions on the live streams here. And again, thanks for joining whichever platform you're on. I'm watching the streams for all 5 platforms that we're streaming to here today. Let's see. So here's a question I'll start with, and this is in no particular order, by the way. I'm trying to show the question, but for some reason it is not showing. So I'll read it anyway. So this is from Rodolfo on LinkedIn, who's joining from Brazil. Thanks for being here, Rodolfo. And he was asking about Agile and ERP implementations and how Agile fits into ERP implementations. For those of you that don't know, there's 2 different schools of thought on how you deploy technology. One is historically, the most popular one historically was the waterfall approach, which is a very clear sequential series of tasks and milestones where you design the technology, you get full buy-in, and you really tighten up the overall design of the technology. Then you start rolling it out to the organization. Whereas Agile is a little bit more nimble. It's meant to be sort of enterprise technology implementation in general is going to necessitate more of a waterfall approach, because you do need to focus on ensuring that you have integrated view, end-to-end view of the entire business process and operations, which a lot of times organizations don't have, or that's why they're implementing technology. It looks like we just lost the LinkedIn feed, so I hope there's still people here on LinkedIn. So that's a little bit about Agile and waterfall. Agile is probably more popular right now, or it's a buzzy sort of a discipline or whatever. So that's something that's worth noting as well. Also, here's another question from LinkedIn, and now I'm able to show the question, which is hello from Paris, France. I'm in training to become an ERP consultant after many years in project management and operations. So that's a good transition, by the way, or some advice I might offer to build on that is if you have business and sort of a foundational understanding of different industries or different functions within a business, that can be a great way to get started in digital transformation or ERP consulting or any sort of technology transformation sort of thing. Let's see here. And like I said, anything you can do to marry those 2 disciplines, business and technology, that's super powerful. And I think one of the big problems or challenges with the digital transformation space or industry is that so many organizations or so many consultants are so focused almost myopically on one of those 2 things and not taking a bigger picture view. So especially when you look at big companies that are trying to tie together massively complex operations and technologies, you need someone, or at least some people on the team, that can really view the whole picture. And that's hard to do because you do have to specialize, especially early in your career. It helps to specialize, but at some point you need people on the project that have been around the block and have seen different dimensions of a transformation like this. So that's a really important consideration as well. Let's see here. There's another question from, I don't have a name here, but it's for someone on LinkedIn. And that is, let's see, do vendors provide you with information? Also, where do you see ERPs going with the advent of blockchain? It's a really good question. So yes, vendors do provide us information. We get sort of the sales and marketing collateral and the, call it the education from the software vendors, but we take it with a grain of salt because it's pretty biased. I mean, they're trying to convince us as independent agnostic advisors that we should be recommending their product to more clients. So it is helpful, but really the best resource we have is just our hands-on experience helping clients implement the different technologies. That's probably the best thing. That's more of a qualitative understanding of how these different technologies work. We also have a database that we use that tracks 30,000 different business requirements against several hundred different enterprise applications in the marketplace. So we can always go to that database to fill in the gaps, the things we don't know. I don't know everything about every system out there, nor does anyone in the world, I don't think. But in this database, it's a collective database that tracks from a lot of different sources what the strengths and weaknesses of the different systems are in the marketplace. So that's one of the big things that we draw into. So that's sort of how we educate ourselves and stay on top of the different technologies out there. As far as the second part of the question, though, is where do you see ERP going with the advent of blockchain? I guess I'm not sure yet. It's still early to tell. Where I've seen it most successfully used so far is in the, I'd say like in the food and the beverage and the pharmaceutical industry, where traceability is really important. So if you don't understand traceability, what that means is if you have, let's just say you're selling some sort of meat product, and it turns out that some of that meat is tainted. Something happened somewhere in the supply chain that tainted that meat. It's not healthy, or some government entity somewhere in the world is forcing a recall of that meat. You have to be able to track where that, sort of where the supply chain, how it all led up to the finished product. And that's what traceability is. Blockchain is a good way to enable traceability, because like with a pharmaceutical company, it starts with chemicals and compounds, goes through a whole production process, and then becomes a finished product, whether it's a drug or whatever it might be, a drug or a medicine. So there too, you have to be able to trace back, and blockchain is a great way to add that sort of digital stamp to each step in the process, so that if you did have to recall a certain batch or a certain lot of product, you don't have to recall everything, but you can at least recall the ones that were impacted by whatever the problem was in the supply chain. So I'd say blockchain has a lot of potential, but it's still pretty immature, at least in the world of business transformation or business technologies. A lot of times people think of blockchain are associated with cryptocurrency because it's the underlying technology that enables cryptocurrency. But businesses and business technologies are also trying to find ways to use blockchain better and more often. So great question. Thanks for that one there. Let's see here. Okay, so thank you. I can't see the names on here, so my feed might be screwed up, but someone just said that LinkedIn is working. So I'm glad it's back up and running. I think it might have gone cut out for a minute there. Here's a question that's a interesting one. I'm going to get to TikTok here in a minute, which I have open on my phone next to me, and there's several questions that have come in there as well. So let me get to that here after this question. What approach to OCM, which is organizational change management, what approach to OCM would you investigate if you were starting from a zero personal baseline? There's a number of approaches: ProSci, Cotter, proprietary, system integrator methodologies. I know there's not a one-size-fits-all, but what would be a good for personal learning? So that's a great question. What I would say is, I guess I'll tell you where I wouldn't start. I would not start with the system integrator methodologies, because generally system integrators, or for those of you that aren't familiar with that term, that is basically the technical implementers. So technology consulting firms that specialize in implementing one sort of technology. My company, Third Stage, is not a system integrator because we're independent, we're technology agnostic, we're not affiliated with the software vendors, and that's intentional. But most of the industry is affiliated in some way with software vendors. So system integrator is a partner that helps implement that sort of technology. Generally, system integrators and technical implementation consulting firms are not good at change management. They'll have your really basic sort of, we'll train you how to use a system, We might give you some communication templates to start with, but they're not going to go deep generally into the full breadth of what you need to do with change management. With change management, you have to be thinking about change readiness, organizational design, how we're going to restructure the organization, job roles and responsibilities. How are people's jobs going to be affected by all the changes that are resulting from the technology? Trying to think what else is included in that. Training is obviously part of it. Communications, and when we talk about training and communications, it shouldn't just be something you do right before you go live with a new system. It should be something you do throughout the entire process, so that you're bringing people along throughout the entire process there. So to get to your question though, what sort of training should you take? I would not rely on the system integrators. That's probably the last place I would start, to be honest. But you had some good ideas here with ProSci. I think ProSci is a good. It's becoming a common certification for change management. Cotter is a good one. Cotter is probably a little bit more academic, which is fine. But as far as how to apply some of those concepts, I think ProSci is the ADCAR. They have an ADCAR methodology that's focused on change. It is something that's fairly pragmatic and focused. And we hire a lot of our consultants that we hire are ProSci certified. So it is something we view positively, or if someone has that, that catches our attention. That alone isn't going to do it, though. I mean, you need more than just the ProSci certification, but that does help. What I would say, though, is if you can combine some sort of change management training, whether it's Cotter or ProSci or some sort of non-system integrator focused change management training, I would combine it into a really killer combination, but killer in a good way. Which would be to add something like a Lean Six Sigma or a really operational focused certification, or some sort of technical certification as well. So for example, if you could get certified in one of the software vendors, or get certified in a certain type of technology and get the change management certification with ProSci or whatever you do, that's a really good combination as well. So I would combine the change management training with something else, because I think that's what part of the problem with change management is, and the reason so few people are good at it is because if you do change management in a silo and you don't fully understand operations and technology, you're just not going to be as effective. So, and it just opens up more career options for you too. You know, maybe it's that you don't become a change management consultant per se, you become a process analyst or a technology consultant, but you really understand change management. That's going to be super powerful, even if that's not where you focus. Great question though. Thank you for that. I'm going to flip over to TikTok here, which is this is my first time ever being live on TikTok, so I'm still trying to figure this out. Thanks for everyone on TikTok that's bearing with me here. So a question here is, I'm graduating in June in supply chain management and logistics, currently in purchasing and procurement, and this person is in Florida. I don't see the name, or I can't tell the name, but thanks for joining from Florida. And then the follow-up question from that same person is, what are some important certifications to have when seeking employment in supply chain management? Which is a great question. So supply chain management, first of all, I think is a really cool area. I think that's a really hot area now, especially, like I said, the last 2 years, the post-pandemic world has exposed the limitations and created a lot of problems with supply chains. So people that really understand supply chain management and can be a part of the transformation that supply chains are going through right now, and probably will be for years to come, which is good news and bad news. Bad news is our supply chains are probably going to be screwed up for a few years. But the good news is that creates a lot of opportunities, especially if you're entering the job force or looking to enter consulting for the first time. So what I would say is that if you can, I don't know of any good supply chain certifications per se, but the training and the certification I really like for any sort of really analytical business process focused angle is Six Sigma. So even though Six Sigma has been around forever, it was really popular, I'd say in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, with General Electric. With Jack Welch was the CEO of General Electric, and he really pushed. He didn't invent Six Sigma. It was invented by Motorola, I believe it was, back in the 80s. But then in the 90s, Jack Welch made it really mainstream in the business world by sort of rolling it out at GE, and that's how GE fueled a lot of its growth back in the 90s and early 2000s before they sort of tanked or started having the trouble that they're having here in the more recent years. But I really like Lean Six Sigma because it's super quantitative, super analytical. It provides a lot of really good frameworks to analyze processes and understand processes a little bit more, measure processes. So that's a really good certification that I highly recommend, either Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma. There's two variations of it. So that might be in a couple places I would start there. So thanks for that question on TikTok. I like this question, and it actually kind of builds on the previous question a bit and covers a point that I forgot to make. So thank you for this. I've got years of experience managing organizational change, but no formal credentials. How important is it to get certified, and which are the ones you would recommend for a move into consultancy? Great question. That's from David on LinkedIn. Thank you for that question, David. And that is, let's see here. Let me think of how to answer that. So I would say if you have experience, the more experience you have, I hate to say it, but the less important certification becomes. There becomes a point of diminishing returns where you can really start to focus on your experience and your background, your operational understanding, your organizational leadership, your organizational change experience and background. So, I guess I have mixed feelings on it. It certainly can't hurt to go get ProSci certified. I think it's like a 3-day course, and it's not cheap, but it's, it could be a decent investment. It's certainly cheaper than going back to school for a master's or anything like that. But I don't think it's absolutely critical when you have experience like you do. I think there's ways you can position yourself and really focus on the experience you have and really highlight your resume and whatnot. I personally, and we as a team at our company at least, we don't look for certifications as sort of a must-have. It's just one of those things that if all things being equal, if I've got two candidates with similar backgrounds, one's certified, one's not, it could be a good tiebreaker, but it's not going to, that alone is not going to be enough to get you into the mix or get the attention of people. I think your experience is going to be a lot more powerful. So if there's a way you can sort of spin your experience in a way that's going to be appealing, and you can transfer some of those raw skills that you've developed in industry in a way that can be relevant to the consulting world, I think that's going to be more powerful. And if you happen to have time and the money and resources and the wherewithal to go get certified as well, that's just gravy on top, in my opinion. And by the way, I said it at the beginning, but in case you're just joining or you missed it before, I have an email address at the bottom of the screen right there. And that is an email address to submit your resume to our company. So we're an independent agnostic digital transformation firm, and we are actually we're growing very quickly. So part of the reason why I'm doing this live stream is, yes, I do like to help and provide career advice and just be a part of the industry discussion, but there's also a self-serving purpose here, which is we're trying to hire people. So just to be totally candid. So if you are interested in career and consulting, drop a note to work at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can even mention that you chatted with me on this live stream, and that will be a way to get the attention of the people that review those for our team. And we're hiring throughout the world, by the way. We have 4 offices internationally, and we have clients on every continent. So we're actively hiring in a lot of parts of the world. There's a question I don't know that I have a good answer to, but I'll try, and maybe others in the audience will have a better answer than I do. But which e-commerce platforms do you see being in demand for mid-size and large implementations? Rather than getting into the pros and cons of different e-commerce providers and vendors like Magento and some of those different ones, I guess I would say instead, there's a couple different buckets of vendors or products you can think about or consider. You have your standalone your standalone e-commerce technologies like Magento, and also like Shopify is a common one for smaller businesses. A lot of people that are just starting out will use Shopify for their e-commerce and taking orders and whatnot. So you have those standalone products, but then you also have bolt-ons or modules within a broader ERP or enterprise-wide system. So products like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, they all have e-commerce capabilities that you can add on or have modules within that. So most, I don't want to say most, I shouldn't say that because it's a good mix of variety of what we see in the industry. In some cases, it makes sense to do a bolt-on standalone. In other cases, organizations are looking for a single system to tie together their entire operation. So it really just depends on what you're looking for there. Let's see. Here's a good question I'll cover here. From Enoch. I hope I pronounced that right. Enoch on LinkedIn. I want to get into the ERP consultant space. I'm currently in SaaS implementation consultancy. Is there a good blueprint to getting there? Well, first of all, I'd say if you're implementing SaaS, that's a good start because you understand a core technology or a core platform that more ERP systems are moving towards, which is cloud and SaaS, software as a service based solutions. I guess I'd need to know a little bit more about your background, what you do. If you're a technical consultant, which I'm going to assume you're more of a technical consultant, but just follow up with another question if I'm wrong and that this isn't relevant. If it's not relevant to you, hopefully it's relevant to some in the audience here. So that is that if you're on the technical side, what I would do is I would try to branch out a bit and really understand some of the other disciplines we've talked about. So it could be that if you're really technical, you've done a lot of deep tech SaaS type implementations, you've got a real solid foundation there. But to be a really good ERP consultant, you also have to have some of the other things I talked about, the business process analysis, the change management, the project management. So if you can branch out into any one or more of those disciplines, some of the other disciplines that I talked about at the beginning of this live stream, then I would say that would be a good way. Because the more you can combine and show that, yes, you have specialization, especially in the early part of your career, you've got some specialization. But then as you branch out and broaden your view throughout your career, that brings a really good combination that quite frankly is hard to find. We have a lot of trouble hiring people that are going to fit in well with our company and with our clients' needs, partly because of that, because you get so many specialists in the industry, but the type of work we do at Third Stage is very broad. It's very strategic. It's looking at everything. It's looking at technology, the people, the process, the strategy, the architecture, the data, all that stuff. And so we need people that either have a fairly broad experience and or can learn quickly to broaden those skills. So hopefully that helps. But I'd say just the more you can branch out, and you don't have to be an expert in everything because you're never going to be. I'm not ever going to be an expert in everything either. But if you can have, 2, maybe 3 areas that you're really good at, then the other stuff, if you just have enough of a basic understanding, that could be a really good combination of stuff to have in your toolbox. And then this is a great question here from Edwin on LinkedIn. How much of the change do you directly manage and implement versus the business internally rolling out with your assistants? Really good question. I like that because it's not an either or answer. It's a combination. You need both. You need the outside consultants to help and provide that outside expertise, but you absolutely have to have the internal resources and people focused on the project as well, because they know the business, they know what it is they're trying to be when they grow up, and ultimately they have to live with whatever the solution is longer term. So for that reason, you can't rely just on the consultants, which some companies do. Including some of our clients. Some of our clients just want to outsource to us and have us just do everything. We're happy to do it, I suppose, in the short term. We make more money, but we're not happy to do it because they're not going to be happy at the end of the day. So a lot of times we spend time pushing clients you've got to free up resources. You have to have a certain amount of minimum commitment and focus from your key stakeholders because, like I said, you're going to own this longer term. So you have to have that sort of buy-in. There's on TikTok, I just got I think it's spam, but it's a comment that says, "I need a boyfriend." I'm married, so I'm not the guy. But if anyone on any of the streams is looking for a girlfriend, there's someone on TikTok that is looking for a boyfriend. Just FYI. But I'll get to the more relevant questions here today. Are the classic SAP? Let me show it first before I jump in. Are the classic SAP application consulting module skills, such as I won't read them all, but just are the different modules in SAP a thing of the past, or how fast will they disappear? Thank you from Denmark, and thank you, Klaus, for joining from Denmark today. So the question isn't about the modules. I misstated. It's about the module skills. So just to back up for a second, in the world of SAP and some of the big ERP systems, they're so big and complex that when you start off, you sort of need to specialize in one module. So you might just focus on financials. You might focus on business intelligence or whatever the area is. I personally started off on the manufacturing side, so I did more of the material management and the MRP or production types of stuff. But you could also do sales and distribution. There's a bunch of others, warehouse management, supply chain, other parts of the supply chain. So usually you focus on one area. I don't know that I have a good question or a good answer. I love this question, though. I just don't know that I have a good answer. Part of me thinks that, at least for the big ERP vendors, those big, massive, gnarly systems, you kind of have to have a level of specialization, because there's no way you can know everything about the one system. And generally you need, some of these teams of SAP implementations could have 50 or 100 full-time consultants that all they're doing is configuring the software. Now, whether or not there really should be 50 or 100 consultants on any project is a whole nother discussion that I'll table for another time. But point being that you get these large teams and you start to specialize in those areas. But then you look at like a NetSuite or some of the mid-market ERP providers, even like a Workday or a Infor or Epicor, where you can realistically know or be involved with more functions and modules within that system, partly because it's just not nearly as complex, but also because the organizations implementing the technologies aren't as large and messy and complex. So I don't know that I think you're always going to have a little bit of that, at least for the big ERP systems. As long as the big ERP systems like SAP and Oracle are still around, I think you're going to have some specialization there. But it doesn't mean you can't change specialties or learn more as you advance in your career, which can be a good way to stay fresh and to keep yourself from getting bored or stagnant in your career. It's great. I love this question too. This is from Chibi. How do you convince a client to focus on internal processes instead of expecting ERP to solve all the problems? It's a great question, and a common problem. I don't know if you're in consulting, but it seems like you would have to be a consultant to know that is a common challenge, and it is a common challenge. You get organizations that think that our processes are broken. We need to go find technology that will fix those processes for us. And yes, the technology could fix your processes for you, but it doesn't let you off the hook for defining your business processes in a great amount of detail. So you do need to define what your current and future state processes are, and you need to let the business processes drive the technology rather than the technology leading the business. And back to the career discussion, that's why the multidiscipline appeal is so important. Because if you understand business processes and technology, you can sort of navigate that chasm a little bit better. If all you do is specialize in technology, you're probably going to be the person that shows up to try to force a square peg into a round hole because you know the technology, but the client has certain business needs. So you have to be able to speak the language at the very least and understand business and understand the needs of the client, which I would say, by the way, is a really important trait of being a consultant. I'd say maybe the most important, which is your ability to listen and empathize and understand. Often overlook. Oh, here's a really good question from Deborah on LinkedIn. And I'm gonna have to hide it in a second because it won't all fit in the text box here. But I'm concerned about working for a systems integrator and feeling pressure to upsell products that aren't in the client's best interest. In your experience, what are some pros and cons of or differences between working for a systems integrator on the supply side versus at a client side consultant? Great question. So we, as a company, and me personally, we are a client side consultant. We don't get paid by software vendors. We frankly don't care what technologies a client does or doesn't implement, but that's very unlike most consultants and most players in the enterprise technology space. Most enterprise players, particularly the software vendors and the system integrators, are very focused on one product and maximizing the sale of that one product and getting the companies that deploy the product to use as much of that technology as they possibly can. That's their job. That's how they make money. It's usually not in the client's best interest. I mean, the product itself may be, but the broad-based one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter thing is not in the client's best interest. It's in the vendors and system integrators' best interest, but not the client's. So I have a strong opinion on why I landed where I did and where I'm at in my career for the last 15 years, which is on the client side and being agnostic and being sort of untethered from the vendor sales and marketing spin that's out there in the marketplace. But having said that, I was on the other side. I started off, like I said before, at Pricewaterhouse, and I was doing SAP implementations. And our job was to fit SAP everywhere we possibly could in the organization. So that was one thing that even at a young age, when I was first starting in consulting, that never quite felt right to me. There were times where we were forcing the software to do stuff that just wasn't built to do, but yet you sort of like you're banging your head against a wall. That's all you know. So you're going to force that product to fit where it shouldn't fit. So that is one problem. I'd say the even bigger problem though is I'll call it the profit motive of system integrators and vendors, where, especially the system integrators, where their job is to staff as many consultants as they can on these projects, especially the bigger ones. So my first project out of grad school had probably, I think it was like 40 or 45 full-time employees. And it wasn't a huge company that we're doing work for. It was pretty big, but not huge. And they brought me onto the project right out of my certification at Pricewaterhouse. That's when I got the SAP certification and learned all the change management frameworks that they had. And they put me on this project, and it took me months to find like enough work to like keep me busy on a full-time basis, but yet they still expected me to bill 50 or 60 hours a week. So I was in conflict from day one in my career, which really soured my experience and my view and whatever of being at one of those big firms. But having said that, I learned a ton. I made a lot of really good relationships that I still have relationships with today, like peers I worked with, I'm still in contact with, and I've hired some of them over the years. Most of them are gone now from that firm and have gone on to other things, which most people do after about 2 years. Most people leave those firms partly for these reasons. But you do learn a lot. You learn a lot about technology, and they've got great training. They do fight for you to get you on projects and that sort of thing, that's really important, especially early in your career at a young age. But you have to reconcile the cost benefit, of course, of that. So I don't know that I have a good answer for you other than to say I have a very strong preference for where I'm at now. I don't know, though, that I could tell you that I would have necessarily changed that, which may sound weird saying. I didn't enjoy it. It was my least favorite consulting job, was that first one I had. But I do see the value, and I did gain some from it. And I think a lot of what I gained helped me later on. So I'm really torn on it, to be honest. I don't have a clear answer. I don't think I would change it, to be honest, but I'm also glad I didn't stay beyond 2 years, because I would have gone insane just amongst us. But these are a lot of really good questions. We're covering a lot of ground here, not just careers, but technology and trends and stuff like that, which is great. Oh, here's one I'm sort of cherry picking now in these with the time we have now. So this question is, I'm curious, is there a role for business relationship managers in digital transformation? It's a dilemma I'm currently experiencing, that they're sunsetting this role. I guess I'm not sure if you're talking about on the consulting side that you are a business relationship manager on the consulting side for your client. Then I'd say that I don't know that role really goes away, or I can't imagine that it would industry wide, because it is an important role. You want to make sure that, for these bigger projects, you want to make sure that everything's going well and that the client relationship is healthy, and that the client's doing the things they need to do to be successful, and that, someone's sort of keeping an eye on the overall project, not as a project manager necessarily, because you presumably would already have someone doing that, but more as just the overall relationship and whatnot. Now, I don't know if you're talking about an internal role. Like if you're in an internal role, I guess I'm not as familiar with a business relationship manager. So maybe follow up if you don't mind, John. And John, by the way, is joining us from YouTube. So thank you for that question. Okay, I'm going to read this one because it's a long question, and it's not related to careers, but I think I'm going to tie it back to careers here. And this is from Vivek on LinkedIn. And he says, we're preparing for a major ERP and warehouse management transformation. Currently working on making sure we have all the current state processes and pain points documented. I hear you talking about mapping the future state. Wouldn't the future state mapping come from the workshops with the ERP vendors? Any advice? Great question. I get this question all the time. People ask it all the time. Like, how can you possibly do your future state if you work with a vendor, or in some cases, you don't even know what the technology is yet? And what I'd say is there's I don't know who created this framework, but there's a 5-level process taxonomy framework that a lot of organizations will refer to. It's something we work from at Third Stage, and other consultants I've worked with have done the same, which is you have level 1 through 5. And level 1 processes are super high level macro processes. And then level 5 is like what keystroke you push in a system, and what information you enter in which fields and all, the really detailed training based type stuff, like that's what you train people on, is that level 5, because that's how you do your job in certain technologies. And I'm not suggesting you get down to level 5 early on before the vendor gets involved. I would say it's more, you would get down to level 1, 2, maybe 3 in that 1 through 5 hierarchy. Once you get down to 3, 4, 5, that's dependent on the technology. And yes, you need the vendors to help guide through that, because they know how the software works, the most recent versions of the software works. They know what the configuration variables are and all that good stuff. But if you skip straight to level 3, 4, 5, which is what a lot of organizations do, they say, well, we're not going to worry about our future state. We'll wait till the vendor gets here, or the system integrator, then we'll map out level 3, 4, 5. But you haven't done level 1 and 2, so you don't know that kind of the overall framework of how your operations should work, and what those priorities are as an organization. And so then you end up spinning your wheels, either shooting in the dark and just picking a path, not knowing whether it's the right one for you or not, or you end up as a team internally trying to figure out what we want our processes to be and what we want to be when we grow up. Meanwhile, all the consultants are charging you by the hour and the project's getting delayed while you're trying to figure that out. So the more you can define that level 1, 2, maybe part of level 3 business process framework up front, it just gives you a strong governance and parameters for the project going forward. Let's see. Just flipping through some questions here, and I've got a couple others here that I had from before that I'll draw from here. And actually, one of the questions I got, I just spoke to a college course in IT yesterday here in Colorado, and I got a bunch of really good questions, and I didn't have time to answer them all, so that's part of why I pulled those questions to cover here today. And one that one of the students asked was, what are some tips for entering the world of ERP consulting? And I think this is relevant whether you're a college graduate, a recent graduate, or if you're halfway through your career, late in your career, and you have a certain amount of industry experience, and now you want to figure out how to be a consultant or how to transition into ERP. There's a lot of different things you can do to enable that. And so what I'd say is, again, pick a discipline. So if you can, first of all, even though you may not know a lot about ERP consulting at the moment, but if you know enough to know like what general direction you want to go in those different disciplines I talked about before, the technology, project management, change management, process improvement, process analysis, all that stuff, pick one of those areas and sort of carve out a specialty or a focus in that area to start. And then over the years or over time, you start to broaden that core and add to it. You can add other disciplines and become even more effective, like I talked about before. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is pick out an area and then find the right opportunity to specialize in that area as well. So that's an area that that'd be one suggestion. And then, if you can, I would also say that if you can learn as much as you can about maybe not the hands-on technology, because you might have to go get a job first to get that training and certification in a certain technology. But if you can learn as much as you can about supply chain or business process operations in general, and or change management and organizational psychology, organizational design, just as two examples, with project management, any of those disciplines, if you can learn as much as you can, either in college or take certifications to get certification in one of those areas, I think that's very important. And then, certainly networking. I mean, for any job change or job seeker, I'd say, be mindful or be deliberate about networking with people. Like, reach out to people like me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm trying to get started. Do you have opportunities, or can you give me some advice, or can you pass my resume on to anyone that you think might be interested if you're not? So I just wouldn't be afraid to reach out to people and be persistent. Don't be upset, or don't let your feelings get hurt if people don't respond. There's a lot of messages I don't respond to, and I always feel bad, but I just don't have time to respond to them all. But I do remember the people that messaged me multiple times. And at some point I end up responding because I remember the name, I remember that person, I might have looked at their profile on LinkedIn, and I just figure if they're that persistent, then I owe them, I admire the fact that they're being persistent, so I want to help them. So I don't know if others are like that too. I would suspect other people, people in hiring positions or other leaders are probably the same. So that would be just some word of advice there. There's another question similar to what we heard, similar to a question before, and this is from Omar on LinkedIn. Do you think that a position like SAP functional consulting is a thing of the past, or does it have a good future? I think what I said there was it's probably a mix. I think you'll always have some of that, but I think more technologies are becoming more integrated and less siloed, or technologies are becoming more specialized where you don't have different modules. So you are seeing some pressure to not do that as much, but I think for the big software vendors, you'll always have that. By the way, one thing to add to my previous answer about how to get started in the world of consulting, again, the shameless plug, the email at the bottom of the screen here, work@thirdstage-consulting.com. You can send a note there, and if you want to send your resume in and be considered as part of our consulting team. And you can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're not already following me there, and or on TikTok or Instagram, YouTube. Follow me on YouTube. But as far as messaging and interacting with me, LinkedIn is probably the best place there. So this question isn't going to show up all the way, but this is from someone responding to Vivek's earlier question. And the follow-up here is do everything you can possibly do before the system integrator arrives. Once they arrive, the billing clock starts. If you're going to SAP, get familiar with SAP best practices, which are readily available, and you can see it in the chat. If you're on LinkedIn, just look in the chat. There's a link that he's provided here. They may be hard to understand at first, but they'll also help you so much in advance. So that's a great question, great point. I think the more you can, it's a great add-on to something I didn't answer before, didn't add to my answer, which is if you can learn as much as you can internally as an organization about the technology, the more likely it is that you can take ownership and not get steamrolled by the system integrators. So I think that's an important point. And by the way, that link too, that's the link here. It looks like it's from SAP's website that has best practices. Poke around at stuff like that. If you're trying to get into consulting to where you can speak the language. So, for example, if you're trying to get a job as a SAP consultant somewhere, either at SAP or at a large consulting firm, just learn the lingo, learn what FICO means, learn what HANA means, learn how HANA is different than the platforms that SAP used in the past. If you can speak intelligently in that way, that's going to help a ton. In fact, I would argue that's probably more important than any sort of certification. If you can just speak the language and speak the lingo and demonstrate that you understand that stuff. Now, the key part, though, is how do you get in front of people to have that opportunity to say that stuff? And that's where, positioning your resume and your cover letter or your email introduction, whatever it is so important. All right, I'll take a couple more questions here. And actually, this might be a good one that but this is a good one. I enjoy it, at least. This is from Christine. And Christine's on LinkedIn, and she asked the question here: does working in different countries and continents influence the way you work with clients? Short answer is yes, it does. For me personally, I'm not an expert in multinational cultures and consulting by any means, but I've done enough of it to know that I have to adjust to different cultures and different environments. It's not even geographic, by the way. A lot of it is just even within one country, whatever your home country is, you look at different industries, different organizations within those industries. They all have different cultures and they have different people. They have a different feel. They have different levels of risk aversion and different things that drive them and make them tick, different warts or weaknesses. So there's a lot of understanding you have to do to be a good consultant in general. Certainly the international piece is really important. I've seen a lot of consultants, myself included, who sort of stumbled through cultural norms and things like that in different countries. But having said that, we pride ourselves on having global multinational teams that support our clients. So if it's a multinational company that we're working with, we have multinational teams, from each of our 4 international offices. So that would be, that's my response there. And so that's back to the consulting career thing in thread here. That would be something that would be super helpful, is just to demonstrate that you understand different types of companies and you understand different cultures. And if you watch any of my YouTube videos, or if you don't, I encourage you to subscribe and watch some of the stuff I put out on my YouTube channel. But I always put out videos with a constant theme or a recurring theme of really needing to understand a client situation and needing to develop a strategy and execution plan that aligns with that client's view of the world. And it's really easy as a consultant to come in with the right answer. I have the best practice. I have the right answer. I'm the expert. It's easy to fall into that trap, but you can't do it. You can't do it and be effective, I should say. Yeah, I think, in my opinion, those are the worst consultants, are the ones that come in with the answer. They've got their methodology, their one way of doing things. It can be okay as long as if you're filtering out and saying no to companies that don't align with your way of doing things, then fine, you could do that. But the problem is most consultants don't do that. They just try to sell their one size fits all answer to whoever will buy it. So it's highly ineffective. I think it actually destroys a lot of business value. It creates a lot of problems. So I think that gets us a fair amount of questions here. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now, but I want to thank you for being here on a Friday, especially those of you in Europe and Africa, and even a couple from Asia Pacific that are joining really late and or in the middle of the night your time. I want to thank you for being here. And if you feel like sharing this recording with anyone that might be interested, feel free to share it. They can always go back and watch this, or if you missed any part of this, you can watch it on demand on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, depending on where you watched, or on TikTok. So be sure to share this, use it as a resource. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or follow-ups. I'm going to try and do these more often as a recruiting mechanism. So hopefully we can have more discussions like this, and I might start to focus on different threads or different trends in the industry or within career management. But in the meantime, if you are interested in a career in consulting, work at thirdstage-consulting.com. The address you see at the bottom of your screen is one way or one place you can apply. I'd love to hear from you. Our team would love to hear from you. We're always looking for good, qualified consultants, ranging from entry-level people all the way on up to super experienced consultants. So we're growing very quickly. We're projecting to have to hire between 15 and 20 people here in 2022 just to keep up with our ongoing growth. It might actually be more than that. So wherever you are in the world, feel free to apply, I should say. Be sure to apply if you're interested. So thanks everyone for being here today. I really appreciate it. Follow me on LinkedIn, subscribe to my YouTube channel, send in a resume if you're interested, and I hope to see you here again soon. Have a great weekend in the meantime, and take care.